Hello and welcome to the next Tutor to You catch-up session for Edexcel GCSE 9-1 Business. In this catch-up session, we're going to focus on the last part of Specification Reference 1.4.1, which links to the options for startup and small businesses. And this session, we're going to focus specifically on franchising. Before we start looking at franchising, however, let's have a go at 2 countdown conundrums. You'll have the time it takes for the music to stop to unjumble the letters that you can see on the screen to identify 2 key terms that link to the last catch-up session that you took part in on business ownership. Okay, let's have a look at the solutions. So hopefully for the first conundrum, you got incorporated. And incorporated means that a business has a separate legal identity to its owners, and therefore it can enjoy the benefit of limited liability. And this relates to the second solution, which is private limited company. And a private limited company is a business whereby shares are traded to family and friends only. Let's move on to looking at franchising. And a definition of franchising is where a business, otherwise known as a franchisor, allows another person or business to trade under its name, and this person or business is known as the franchisee. Some key features of franchising include the format of the franchise is used by the franchisee when setting up the business, including its products, marketing, and a specific location is given to the franchisee to trade from. Entrepreneurs therefore do not have to come up with their own original ideas, and this therefore reduces the risk of business failure because the franchisee will be trading under the franchisor's name. The franchisee, however, therefore has to pay a fee to the franchisor for the right to trade under its name and use it. And this could be very expensive dependent on the type of franchise that the franchisee is taking up. The franchisee will also have to pay a percentage of its revenue to the franchisor each year, and these are called royalties. Here are some common examples of franchises that you are probably aware of, and a lot of franchises relate to the fast food industry. So we have Subway, McDonald's and Domino's. For the exam, you need to know the key features of franchising as well as the advantages and disadvantages. This slide specifically focuses on the advantages and disadvantages linked to a franchisor. Remember, a franchisor is the business that allows another individual or another business to trade under its name. So the first advantage for a franchisor is that it allows expansion without the risk. The risk of setting up another franchise outlet falls with the franchisee because the franchisee would have to cover the costs of the new franchise outlet and have to work hard to generate revenue. Secondly, the franchisor would receive regular income from royalties, which remember is a percentage of the revenue, not the profits. Thirdly, the franchisor would retain control over major decisions that are made within the business. For a fast food outlet, this would be things like menus, uniforms, portion sizes, to ensure that customers, when they enter a new fast food outlet, they would have the same customer experience regardless of whether they entered a new franchise outlet in Sunderland or in Solihull. And this would help to meet and satisfy customer expectations. Looking at the disadvantages, the franchisor would, however, obviously not receive all the profits because they receive regular income from the royalties, as already discussed. They would also lose some day-to-day control over decision-making, which would fall in the hands of the franchisee. Finally, their reputation could be affected if they make a poor selection of choice of the franchisee, because remember, the franchisee would be operating under their name, so any bad decisions that that franchisee made could reflect on the business negatively. Looking at the advantages and disadvantages of a franchisee. So remember, a franchisee is the business or person who is allowed to trade under the brand name of a franchisor. So the first advantage is that because of this, the franchisee has a greater chance of business success because customers and people would recognise an established brand, and therefore they may trust this more than an offering from an independent business, which therefore may increase the franchisee's sales. Secondly, the franchisee may benefit from promotional campaigns developed by the franchisor, which otherwise they would not be able to afford. This would increase brand awareness and therefore again help to generate more sales. Finally, the franchisor would provide training and support to new franchisees and ongoing training and support as well, and this would help to ensure a consistent service and offering is provided within all franchise outlets. The disadvantages include that the setup fee can be very expensive, and this is dependent on the franchise that is taken up by the franchisee. As I've already mentioned, the franchisee would have to pay the franchisor royalties on a regular basis, and this would limit the amount of profit that the franchisee would receive. Finally, the franchisee would not have full control over decisions, and therefore this may make the franchisee feel as if he or she is more of a manager rather than an independent business owner, and this may cause some demotivation. So let's have a look at some exam gold. Franchising is one of the best ways for an entrepreneur to set up their own business, as there is a significant reduction in risk operating under an established brand name rather than setting up as an independent business, which people and customers do not recognise. Once the entrepreneur has developed the skills, therefore, in running their own franchise, they then could go on to set up their own business at a later date if they wish to, where they would have complete freedom to make their own decisions and keep all the profits for themselves. And obviously, this ties in with the disadvantages of running a franchise operation for the franchisee. However, it is worth noting, particularly in evaluative comments in your exam answers and when you're reading case studies that are linked to franchises, that not every franchise is a success, and franchisees should do their research and choose wisely before they invest and pay the setup fee to set up a new franchise outlet for that particular franchise operation. So we've now covered the theory that you need to know for the exam on franchises. So let's have a look at an exam style question. And similarly to the sole trader catch-up session, we're going to look specifically at an explain question. So explain one benefit to an entrepreneur of starting a business by buying a franchise. And a similar question to this has been seen on the 2019 paper. So remember the key principles for answering an explain question. Identify a point that answers specifically the question set. So in this instance, the explain question is looking for one benefit. Once you have written your benefit in the first sentence of your response, you then need to go on and explain that benefit with two linked strands that explain the point you've made. And you are flagging to the examiner that you are making a strand through using connectives such as this means that, therefore, which in turn, or as a result. And there are others that you could use. These are just a few examples. Remember, your strands must be interconnected, logical, and make sense to the question that is set. Okay, so what I'd like you to do in a moment is pause the video and have a go at either answering this question in full or planning a response to this question. Now, every explain question, as you know, is worth 3 marks, and therefore you should be spending just under 3 minutes answering this question if you've chosen to write it out in full. Once you've had a go at this activity, then please restart the video. Okay, so I'm going to show you a sample response on screen in a moment. Now, the benefit that I may have chosen may be different to the one that you've written or planned in your response. This doesn't matter. The principles behind the exam technique are what you are looking for to see whether your response would have got awarded 3 marks in the exam. So let's have a look. In the first sentence, you need to have identified a clear point or a clear benefit to an entrepreneur of starting a business as a franchise operation. So I've written the entrepreneur will be trading under an established brand name. That's clearly a benefit. And it shows distinct knowledge of franchising, which is really important to ensure that the examiner knows that you understand the key concept and topic area of the question. There is never a need for you to define any key terms in an explain question. The only time you'd ever define a key term is when you would be writing an answer to a define question. As a result, customers may be more inclined to buy from a business they recognised and trusted. So this is development of the first point here. So under an established brand name, as a result, so we've got a nice connective there, customers are more likely to buy from this type of business. This means that, so we've got another connective that is flagging to the examiner, we have another little strand in our answer, that there will be less risk to the entrepreneur of business failure when buying the franchise. So clearly, if you read through this answer again, you can see that there is a point, there is a second sentence which shows a clear interconnected strand explaining the point that has been made in the first sentence, and then there is a second interconnected strand in the third sentence developing that point and explanation even further. As I said, you may have come up with a different point. What you need to do is check that you have a distinct benefit, that you have explained that benefit in the second sentence, and ideally you have a third separate sentence using connectives to flag to the examiner that you have a second linked strand so that 3 marks can be awarded. So let's just recap over some of the key information that I shared with you in the catch-up session on sole traders about explain questions. Remember to keep practicing explain questions, as 6 of this type of question will appear in each paper that you will sit in the summer. This equates to 20% of the marks, and therefore this type of question is very valuable and important, and therefore it is really vital that you accurately answer explain questions every time. Really take note of whether the question is asking for and explain a benefit, a drawback, an advantage, disadvantage, way or method to ensure that your answer fully focuses on the question that has been set. So finally, just to recap on 1.4.1 of the specification, which links to types of business ownership. You've been looking at sole traders, partnerships, private limited companies and franchises over the last few catch-up sessions, as well as unlimited and limited liability. Types of business ownership is a very commonly assessed topic area that appears in the examinations, and remember, you need to know the key features and the advantages and disadvantages of each of those specific and different types of business ownership that are listed in the specification. It's therefore really important that you revise each type of business ownership carefully as even if there isn't a distinct question on business ownership, every case study included in the exam papers will be based on a specific business context. Demonstrating understanding of the type of ownership in your answers can help you gain marks for application. So for example, a private limited company, if you talked about limited liability, that is relevant to that specific type of business ownership, and dependent on how you use that in your response, you may get some marks for application. So even if there is not a specific question on this particular topic area, using this information within your responses can help you to gain those really important application marks, which many students struggle with accessing in the exams. And this concludes the catch-up session for franchising, and also all the catch-up sessions on 1.4.1, the options for startup and small businesses.